Good morning. This is White Raptor News Ministries. All praise and glory to the Supreme Spirit of Truth, the Living One, the Author of life, the one that moves all things in place, the perpetual, always in motion, the one without beginning or end, the point of singularity. All praise and glory to the Supreme Spirit of Truth, not the Supreme Divinity, folks. You got to understand that there is absolutely a difference between the supreme divinity, which is spirit, or the supreme divinity, which are flesh, men in flesh suits calling themselves gods, and then the supreme creator. There are two entities, and that is something that you've got to understand. There was something that was permitted. If Satan exists, as the Bible says Satan exists, then Satan was permitted. Satan was the one who created the host system, the Gentile nations. See, in Isaiah chapter 45:7, God, Lord Yahweh, in this parable is telling you that he's the one that creates evil and he's the one that creates good. Well, this is the supreme creator. Then he permitted something to create a host system. The Anunnaki, the Anak, the Anakai, you call them whatever you want. But they were given permission to create the Gentile nations. And then it's the supreme creator, according to the scriptures, Yahweh, is the one that breathed the breath of life into the second man, the human, the black man, the Hebrew, call them what you want. Okay, these are a chosen people to the supreme creator. Now, personally myself, I don't believe that either. I don't believe that Yahweh is the supreme creator as well, because clearly when you write in God of Israel here, God of Israel comes to 666, okay, and God of Israel is skull and bones, okay, and against the law. This is Strong's Concordance, 111 in the Strong's Concordance is illegal. So these verses, all in different types of gematria, don't fare well for God of Israel. And this is Hebrew gematria, 320. Now, not to glorify, I got to just say this. If I taught that Yahweh was 666 and I never mentioned at all that Jesus Christ was 666, and I shared information about the 666 system, I would have tens of thousands of listeners. My channel is small because only a remnant are going to get it. When people hear this message, I've literally, since I started this channel 4 years ago, have literally had 2,000, maybe 2,500 people that have come in this room and then turn around and right away leave. Because the minute they hear the connection that Christ is 666, Christos, this is a breakdown from Greek. That's what the Greeks called Christ, was Christos, and Christos in Greek is 666. Also, Christos in Greek is 430, and this is how you get to God, Elohim. Elohim are both good and evil. Elohim are all used for the Supreme Creator's glory. We're going to read through Samuel chapter 14 real quick this morning, because I got to get up and I got to get to work, and I've been lagging on my lessons here. But I don't ever lag when it comes to, kneeling down in my bed or lying in my bed and giving praise to the Creator and repenting and asking for forgiveness for the transgressions of the sins that I've lived while through my life. So we're here at Samuel chapter 14, and this is a continuance of the Samuel rebukes Saul in Israel without weapons. Okay, Jonathan attacks the Philistines. That's what we're going to continue on, where Jonathan attacks the Philistines. One day, Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the Philistines' outpost on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron. With him were about 600 men among whom was Ahiah, was wearing, probably I slaughtered that, who was wearing an ephod. He was the son of Ichabod's brother, Ahitub, son of the Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. No one was aware that Jonathan had left. Excuse me, my eyes itching. On each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One was called Bozez, the other Shinai. One cliff stood to the north towards Michmash, and the other to the south towards Gibeah. Jonathan said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." "Do all that you have in mind," his armor-bearer said. "Go ahead. I am with you. Heart and soul." Jonathan said, "Come on, then we will cross over towards them and let them see us. If they say to us, 'Wait there until we come to you,' we will stay where we are and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' we will climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands." So both of them showed themselves to the Philistines' outpost. "Look," said the Philistines, "the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes they were hiding in." The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor-bearer, "Come up to us, and we'll teach you a lesson." So Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, "Climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hands of Israel." Jonathan climbed up, using his hands and feet, with his armor-bearer right behind him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer followed and killed behind him. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor-bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about half of an acre. Israel routs the Philistines. Then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp and field, and those in the outpost in raiding parties, and the ground shook. It was panic sent by God. Saul's outlooks at Gibeah in Benjamin saw the army melting away in all directions. Then Saul said to the men who were with him, "Muster the forces and see who is left." When they did it, it was Jonathan and his armor-bearer who were not there. Saul said to Ahiah, "Bring the ark of God." At that time it was the Israelites. While Saul was talking to the priests, the tumult in the Philistine camp increased more and more. So Saul said to the priest, "Withdraw your hand." Then Saul and all his men assembled and went to battle. They found the Philistines in total confusion, striking each other with their swords. Those Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines and had gone up with them to their camp went over to the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the Israelites who had hidden in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were on the run, they joined the battle in hot pursuit. So on that day the Lord saved Israel, and the battle moved on beyond Beth-Aven. Jonathan eats honey. Now the Israelites were in distress that day, because Saul had bound the people under an oath, saying, "Cursed be anyone who eats food before evening comes, before I have avenged myself on my enemies." So none of the troops tasted food. The entire army entered the wood, and there was honey on the ground. When they went into the woods, they saw the honey oozing out, yet no one put his hand to his mouth, because they feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard that his father had bound the people with the oath, so he reached out at the end of the staff that was in his hand and dipped it into the honeycomb. He raised his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. Then one of the soldiers told him, "Your father bound the army unto a strict oath, saying, 'Cursed be anyone who eats food today.' That is why the men are faint." Jonathan said, "My father has made trouble for the country. See how my eyes brightened when I tasted a little of the honey. How much better it would have been if the men had eaten today some of the plunder they took from their enemies. Would not the slaughter of the Philistines have been even greater?" That day, after the Israelites had struck down the Philistines from Michmash to Ajalon, they were exhausted. They pounced on the plunder, and taking sheep, cattle, and calves, they butchered them on the ground and ate them together with the blood. Well, yeah, I was just going to say, butchered them on the ground and ate them with the blood. It doesn't even sound like they cooked them. They just ate them raw. I don't know about Israel sometimes, man, as I read this Bible. Then someone said to Saul, "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that has blood in it." Shame on you, Israel. This is why I heard somebody say the other day that Israel are cannibals. That you guys were always eating raw flesh and drinking the blood of animals. So this is why I believe that 2/3 of you, as it says in the Bible, are going to perish for lack of knowledge, because you don't stand by these oaths. Now, personally myself, what I don't understand is you have a God that's saying here, let me show you. So I believe that this is a pretty strong question, to ask yourself, which says, "Bring your worthless offerings no more. Your incense is detestable to me. Your new moons, Sabbaths, and convocations, I cannot endure iniquity in a solemn assembly." So, bring your worthless offerings no more. Your incense is detestable to me. Sabbaths, convocations. Also, your blood sacrifices as well. Isaiah 66:3 says, "Whoever slaughters an ox is like one who slays a man." Wow. "Whoever sacrifices a lamb is like the one who breaks a dog's neck. Whoever presents a grain offering is like one who offers pig's blood. Whoever offers frankincense is like one who blesses an idol. Indeed, they have chosen their own ways and delight in their abominations." So I'm not the one that's writing this information. So when you have something that is sacrificed like a lamb, whenever sacrifices a lamb, isn't Jesus a lamb? Is like the one who breaks a dog's neck. Also make note that we have a God that's against sacrifice here, as it's saying in Isaiah 66:3. So why would that same God, send a son to be destroyed and beaten and tore down and then butchered on a cross with spikes ran through his hands and feet? Well, I got another question to ask yourselves. Psalms chapter 34, verse 20, Bible Hub. How can spikes be ran through Jesus' hands and feet when the Bible tells us plainly he protects all his bones, not one of them will be broken? You can't crucify a man and drive spikes through his hands and feet without breaking bones. So we have a problem here. Also, Isaiah chapter 53. Down here at 10, "Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and curse him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin." So here we got, the Lord is making Jesus Christ an offering for sin, but yet he protects all his bones and not one will be broken. That's a contradiction, folks. He will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. So after he has suffered, the Lord's will prosper in his hand. So Jesus prospered in the Lord's hand. Jesus lived prolonged in his days. He didn't die on the cross. Jesus here, he will see his offspring. Jesus had kids, lived a prolonged life, and prospered in the Lord's hands. And then you drop down here, and it says that he will see the light of life and be satisfied by his knowledge. My righteous service will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors, for he was born with the sins of many. Let's jump over here to Isaiah chapter 53, King James Bible. The reason why I read multiple scriptures, folks, is because they say different things. So you got to read them. Here, reading from 8 to 9, he was taken from prison, Sheol. This is Sheol that they're talking about. And from judgment. Jesus was taken from Sheol and taken from judgment. And who shall declare his generations? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. Jesus was cut from the land of the living, for to the transgressions of my people he was stricken, and he made his grave with the wicked. Jesus' grave was with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Now people might ask, well, that's kind of conflictual, and I understand, but what have I been trying to teach you for such a long time? John chapter 5 verse 31, Bible Hub. John 8:14, Bible Hub. So Jesus is declaring here, if he testifies about himself, his testimony is not valid. Jesus tells you himself, the testimony about Jesus tells you himself that his testimony is not valid if he bears witness of himself. And then Jesus turns right around and he says here, Jesus replied, even if I testify about myself, my testimony is valid. So which is it? Is Jesus' testimony valid about himself, or is it not valid about himself? Well, Jesus says, you judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. Jesus doesn't judge anybody. Well, who's this Jesus? Okay, because you got Jesus saying here that he judges no one, and then you got him here. Do not think that I've come to bring peace. I have not come to bring peace, Jesus says. Jesus hasn't come to bring peace, but he's come to bring the sword. Folks, Jesus, this is why, right here, Revelations chapter 1, verse 17. When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man. Then he placed his right hand on me and said, do not be afraid, I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead and now I'm alive. I think I've pulled the wrong scripture up. Right there, it's 16. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and coming out of his mouth was a sharp, double-edged sword. The double-edged sword that's coming from Jesus Christ's mouth is devil speak. It's his tongue. He says one thing and then he says another. Now, what I need you to understand is I teach there's duality. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, Bible Hub. This God Elohim who created man in his own image, this is the devil. Okay, Elohim here created man in his own image. And in the image of God, he created himself, properly self, a demonstrative sense of entity, a divinity, an entity, a divinity, the supreme divinity. We are all supreme divinities of the supreme creator. There's only one. In reality, us talking to one another is simply God talking to himself, placing us underneath of a spell and forgetting and letting us forget where we come from. And the only way that you can remember where you come from is by repenting and understanding your transgressions against the laws and commandments. Now, there is a parable that says, I think it's Romans, and in the blood of Christ the law ends. For Christ is the end of the law, to bring righteousness to everyone who believes. So if you believe in Jesus, supposedly the law ends. And there's an instructor out there that's telling people where sin doesn't exist, or where law doesn't exist, then there is no sin. That the judges, us as judges, this instructor says, hey, just don't judge anybody. Let everybody be who they are. Well, hold on. That means that you got not to judge anybody. So if a murderer murders somebody in their family, you don't judge them. You just, hey, you turn the other cheek. Let them rape or kill your other child as well. Okay? How about this? How about when somebody lies to you? You don't judge them? I judge no one, Jesus says. See, this is a wishy-washy manuscript. Why? Because the Gentile got their hands on it. Therefore, the priesthood being changed, there was also a change in the law. For when the priesthood is changed, the law must be changed as well. What was the priesthood changed from? It was changed from a black priesthood to a white priesthood. Jeremiah chapter 14, verse 2, Bible Hub. Judah mourns and her gates languish, her people wail for the land, and cries go up from Jerusalem. Over here, King James Bible, Judith mourns and the gates thereof languish. They are black. Israel is black onto the ground, and the cries of Jerusalem has gone up. So, the God of the living, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob of the living, his chosen children, the Israelites, are a nation of black people to the ground. And that's the double-edged sword that comes from Jesus' mouth. You have broken faith, he said. Roll a large stone over here at once. Then he said, go out among the men and tell them, each of you bring me your cattle and sheep, and slaughter them here and eat them. So we get to slaughter sheep for our own transgressions against God, slaughter animals, kill animals, destroy animals' lives. Some will tell you this is why they were given dominion to rule over all the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, the cattle, and all the creatures that walk on the ground. I don't believe in slaughter. I don't believe in sacrifice. I don't believe in any of it. Okay, I don't believe in slaughtering animals. This world here is an upside-down world. This is why in heaven, in paradise, in the garden, a child can stick his hand in the viper's den and it won't be bitten. Nothing is killed. Do you think the Supreme Creator's sitting on a pot, taking a dump, shitting in a bowl? I'd say not. This channel I've been listening to is telling people that God is not spirit. Well, clearly she doesn't understand the parable of 6:12 of Ephesians, which tells us it's not about the flesh and blood. So if it's not about flesh and blood, then that's telling you that we are spiritual beings. We have supernatural beings, and then we have spiritual beings. You got to understand, supernatural beings are flesh. And then the spiritual being is spirit. It's a spiritual man. Do not sin against the Lord by eating meat with blood still in it. So everyone brought his ox that night and slaughtered it there. Then Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first time he had done this. Saul said, "Let us go down and pursue the Philistines by night and plunder them till dawn, and let us not leave one of them alive." "Do whatever seems best to you," they replied. But the priest said, "Let us inquire of God here." So Saul asked God, "Shall I go down and pursue the Philistines?" Well, it seems that God sure does have a lot of interaction with people. If God is invisible, how can people have a conversation with some? See, when it talks about a God in this parable here, let's see. 1 Samuel chapter 14, verse 22. It's off that time. So Saul inquired of God. This is Elohim again. Behelohim. Plural of Eloah. Gods in the ordinary sense, but specifically used of the Supreme Creator. You see, this is why Jesus is saying to us, "Is it not written in your law that I've said you're gods?" We are the gods, folks. We are broken, fragmented pieces like Humpty Dumpty who sat on a wall. You see, when we fell, we shattered into millions of pieces. We were no longer one with Source. We fell and we were broken. Right here. You see, when we separated from the Supreme Creator, we fell. To fall, and to fall is a lie. We fell into this plane of existence on a lie. You understand that there's a war that's taking place, and outside this plane of existence, there's a God saying, "Hey, you can come to this place, this world here, and you can possess a flesh suit. You can make your own kingdom. You can be rich. You can make money. You can have power. You don't have to follow God. You don't have to listen to the Supreme Creator. You don't have to worship Him. Come here to this place here and worship your flesh." And that's what everybody does. They worship their desires. They fall into their desires. And to fall is a lie. You've fallen into this plane of existence on a lie. So Saul asked God, "Shall I go down and pursue the Philistines? Will you give them into the hands of Israel's hands?" But God did not answer him that day. Saul therefore said, "Come here, all you who are leaders of the armies, and let us find out what sin has been committed today. As surely as the Lord has rescued Israel's lives, even if the guilt lies with my son Jonathan, he must die." But not one of them said a word. So kings and queens were willing to kill their own sons and stuff simply for dipping a stick inside of honey and taking a lick off of it. Sounds kind of extreme, don't you think? I mean, come on, really, seriously. I mean, my thoughts aren't like God's thoughts, as it plainly says in the Bible, and God's thoughts aren't like human thoughts. So, but we got to ask ourselves, who is it that's given us all these quirky laws? See, I live my life by the 10 Commandments. I try not to stray by the 10 Commandments. And I don't place a name next to the Spirit of God, You're not to invoke the names of other gods. You're not to do it. Exodus chapter 20, verse 3. Exodus chapter 20, verse 3. Bible Hub. "Here you shall have no other gods." We're the gods. So this God here is saying, and this God here, no other gods, is lowercase God and higher case God. It's divine. It's a divine being, exceedingly God, mighty, judges. You see that we are the judges. And Christians believe with Christ ends the law. If we didn't judge, then a person wouldn't find themselves unworthy. I disagree, man. I think if a child lies to you and you catch them in the lie, then the child needs to be disciplined, not patted on the back, not told you're a good boy. You know, a child reaches, I do believe, however, if a child reaches out for something on a table, that you don't tell the child no, you don't speak any word at all, you remove what it is you don't want the child touching. This prevents you teaching a child to say no. We never tell our children no. We remove what it is that we don't want them doing. We don't smack them on the hand. You don't do any of that. You just simply grab the ashtray that's on the table that the child keeps reaching for, and you set it on something higher. If the child reaches for another thing on the table, then you take that item and you set it up on something higher. And every time the child does something, this is how you train and teach your child. Okay, you say no, no, no. Now you're teaching your child how to say no. Saul then said to all the Israelites, you stand over there. I and Jonathan, my son, will stand over here. Do what seems best to you, they replied. Then Saul prayed to the Lord, the God of Israel, Elohim, why have you not answered your servant today? If the fault is in me or my son Jonathan, respond with Aram. But if the man of Israel are at fault, respond with Thurman. Jonathan and Saul were taken by lot, and the men were cleared. Saul said, cast the lot between me and Jonathan, my son, and Jonathan was taken. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. So Jonathan told him, I tasted a little honey with the end of my staff, and now I must die? Saul said, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan. But hey, wait a minute. God says that if you shed, and if one Israelite sheds another Israelite's blood, then by man's hands, that Israelite's blood shall be shed. So even if Saul kills his own son, he's shedding his son's blood, and that goes against the very commandment that was given, not to kill. I see this Bible is messed up. It's all jacked up. May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan. But the men said to Saul, should Jonathan die, he who has brought about this great deliverance in Israel? Never. As surely as the Lord lives, not a hair on his head will fall to the ground. For he did this today with God's help. Which God? Hold on, man. Who are they talking about? Now we're talking about different gods and lords and people. So the men rescued Jonathan, and he was not put to death. Then Saul stopped pursuing the Philistines, and they withdrew to their own land. After Saul had assumed rule over Israel, he fought against their enemies on every side, Moab, the Ammonites, Edom, the kings of Zebah, and the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he inflicted punishment on them. He fought valiantly and defeated the Amalekites. The Amalekites are also a tribe of the Anunnaki, the Anakites, delivering Israel from the hands of those who had plundered them. Saul's family. Saul's son were Jonathan, Ishvi, and Melchishua. The name of his older daughter was Merab, and that of the younger was Micah. His wife's name was Ahanaam, daughter of Ahimaaz. The name of the commander of Saul's army was Abner, son of Ner, and Ner was Saul's uncle. Saul's father Kish and Abner's father Ner were sons of Abiel. All the days of Saul there was bitter war with the Philistines, and whenever Saul Saul, a mighty or brave man, he took him into his service. All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed the lesson. I got to get ready to cut out of here and make a few extra ducats for my vacation that's coming up. Blessings be to all the children that serve the Supreme Spirit of Truth. Blessings to those that don't kill. Blessings to those that don't murder, rape, destroy, beat down. We're in a world that's upside down, folks. Okay, this Bible has been turned upside down. If God's chosen children, truly the Hebrew, the Bible was written by Hebrews, then this Bible has been hijacked from Gentile and it's been changed to high hell. And in that change comes death. Don't be misled by ministers. Read the scriptures yourself. Go to the Spirit of truth. It must be the Spirit of truth because there's also a spirit of lies. Duality exists. The point of singularity, okay, created both good and evil. And he does have laws and commandments which are required to be followed. Don't believe in that garbage with the law, with the death of Christ, that the law ends. Because the Bible's very clear, okay? It's very clear. The Bible was changed from other prophets that never had any right to change anything. Let me throw one last parable out at you. Romans chapter 3, verse 7, Bible Hub. And this is Paul, the writer. Paul's written many books in the New Testament. And Paul himself says, however, if my falsehood, over here King James Bible, for if the truth of God hath more bound through my lie. Paul is lying to you folks, okay? Unto God's glory, why yet am I still judged as a sinner? Because you are a liar, and I'll throw one last one out as well. 21:8 Revelations Bible Hub. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the abominable, and all murderers, and sexually immoral, and sorcerers, and idolaters, and all liars. What's that? All liars. Paul tells you himself, straight from his own frickin' mouth, through my lie. I don't see how... And Christians, they'll twist this up, and they'll tell you that I am reading the parables inaccurately. No, folks. It's very clear that all liars will find their way to the lake of fire. But if my lie, Paul says, the truth of God abounds to his glory, why am I still judged as a sinner? One last time, however, if my falsehood accentuates God's truthfulness to the increase of his glory, why am I still condemned as a sinner? Because Paul is a liar. The New Testament is polluted with lies. But understand, they've taken parts out of the Old Testament and placed them in the New Testament. This Bible has been all twisted up. Genesis isn't the first book of the Bible. Genesis, Revelations, if there's a book, or the book of Enoch. There are other books that existed. When Moses was reading to the people of Israel, he was reading from a book. Okay, he wasn't reading from his own book. He was reading from a book that had already been written. So there are books that were written before Genesis. The reason why Genesis is the first book of the Bible is because it was written by Gentile. This is why you have words like genocide. This is why they've changed the word sex, a man and woman sex, to gender, because it's been written by Gentile, which are Gentile in flesh. The Bible has been hijacked. I've told you that. Do not give to the pigs what is holy, or cast your pearls before swine, is telling you, don't give this book to the Gentile, because if they do, they'll change it by their lies, by their falsehoods. You guys are following a false doctrine in Christianity, and if you don't wake up, if you don't hear these messages, if you can't understand that, then your part will be that which burns with the fire and sulfur, the second death. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. This is White Raptor News Ministries.